What is up, guys and gals? Thanks for joining me here on my channel. We are live. It's been a while. My name's Steve. I'll be your host for the next couple minutes. And guys, no, I'm not looking at another tobacco scent today, although I wouldn't be surprised if I wanted to do that. I probably normally would. We're looking at another Dunhill Icon flanker. Yes, I'm very, very late to the party, but I've known about this frag for quite some time. I've just been waiting to not only live with it for a while, which I've learned from Mark Robes08. Please check out his channel on YouTube. It's phenomenal. He's the old G. He's probably one of the only ones left from that time period who is still very, very relevant and still coming hard and fresh. And what an incredible library Mark has, a catalog rather of just one of the most extensive libraries I've ever seen of perfumes literally on the planet. And it's rare that Mark hasn't tried most fragrances, except for things like I've noticed if it's super, super niche-y, super, super artsy, or really hard to get, or from a foreign country, those are about the only ones he may not have gotten his grubby little paws on, that we like to say in the industry. Just kidding. But at any rate, all that aside, I noticed that Mark wasn't the biggest fan of this one. This is a Dunhill Icon Elite, and I'm not saying he trashed it or anything. Nothing like that. Nothing that grandiose. But he, along with a lot of other reviewers in the community, did not particularly love Dunhill Icon Elite. This is the bottle, so we get a nice visual. This is the big boy, which you can get now on online discounter for, I think, around roughly, I think honestly, like around $50. You get a whole big giant bottle. So this used to retail, I think, for around 125, if I'm not mistaken. Minimum of 95 minimum. So to get this for like $50 or less, maybe as low as 45, if you shop around, is really, really a phenomenal deal. And these are some of the best bottles, as Mark has pointed out repeatedly. These are some of the best and heaviest bottles in the industry. Very heavy glass, and I believe a metallic or sprayed composite, something like that. Just absolutely perfect technical engineering here. I mean, this is the way it should be done. And I mean, look at that high gloss factor. It's just absolutely stunning. Don't have the box, not a huge box guy, but whatever. It came with one, but I threw it away. Now, I do think it's fair to say, guys and gals, that this fragrance is, number one, very misunderstood. It's very misunderstood. And secondly, it's simply a more mature, slightly more grown-up affair than Dunhill Icon. Let me explain. Dunhill Icon, yes, it's sexy as hell. We picture James Bond driving an Aston Martin. I don't know, Volante, Virage. Pick the model that you like. It doesn't really make a difference. Unless you're a really old guy and you prefer the real old Astons, that's fine. Icon started it all. That's fair to say. It's sexy. It's a little bit sharp. It's a little bit brash in a very seductive British way. And those points are hard to argue, but I would also say that there are little bitty aspects about Icon that in retrospect are a little bit more skewed towards youth than was at first apparent. And while it is still a fantastic and excellent sort of a game changer, really, in Fragcom, I don't think it's as mature a scent as it was initially portrayed or conveyed or believed to be. I think this actually is a much more mature scent. Now, granted, this is a little bit more old-fashioned, right? This is not as cutting edge in one sense, a formula as is Icon. This is a little bit more of an old school, slightly more traditional, actually much more traditional recipe, right? As noses go. But it's not entirely fair to say either that it's just a copycat clone that's been pulled out of like the cupboard and the drawer from 1945 or something. That's not really, or 55 or 65. That's not fair either. Although it is fair to say that it has a lot of the same ingredients that French perfumes and other, and also British, Italian, and American had from a much older time period, 70s, early 70s through the late 70s and early 80s, especially. Minus things like strong aldehydes or whatever, or heliotropes, but or ambroxan, for example, right? But let's get into why I think should not be slept on, why I think this is grossly underrated and somewhat fairly misunderstood. And we'll see if you can decide if this is one that you want to give some time to live with and understand, and maybe come to love, or at least really, really appreciate in your fragrance rotation. So let's get into the notes, and I'll talk about my experience with it. Okay, this dropped back in 2016. Definitely not new at this point. I believe it was the second. It was either the second or the third in the later iterations of Icon, the so-called flankers, right? Okay, so it's woody, it's aromatic, it's warm and spicy, it's got some citrus, it's also a little bit fresh, and it's very balsamic, however you say that. You're going to get vetiver in a very strong dose, I might add, sandalwood in a medium light dose, abonos. I think that's really maybe a synthetic ebony wood. I don't think that's a real wood. I could be wrong, but I think they meant to say it's either synthetic ebony wood, or maybe that is a real wood. I've never heard of abonos in my entire life. I'm reading off the Fragrantica website. And there is some cardamom in here, but I think there's a lot of other things going on in here as well. It's got bergamot, lime, bitter orange, cardamom and vetiver, we already mentioned. Sandalwood, already mentioned. Blue sage, we'll just call it sage. Juniper. This thing keeps popping up. Hate those pop-up windows. Black pepper. Suede. Yeah, I knew this thing had some kind of leather, and we'll get into that in a second. And yes, ebony. Whether this ebony's real or abonos synthetic ebony, whatever, the note of ebony wood is in here. It's believed that labdanum is also in here, which I would not be surprised of in the least. And I think there's a subtle blend of some kind of spices, also not quite listed here. Not sure what those are. It's got a little hint of like licorice way, way deep down, or something like that. Maybe some pink pepper, maybe, I don't know. There's something else in here I can't put my finger on, but whatever. Now, I will show you that this sprayer is one of the very best in the industry. Just absolute perfect, stone cold, perfect precision application. Absolutely phenomenal. Incredible mist. It really, really hyper atomizes the thick perfumed concentration, which has a nice high oil content. I would say probably 20%, or close to it, maybe 18. You probably, yeah, I don't know. Whatever it is, it's up there. And you get really, really focused, a cone distribution. Just, oh God, the more I live with this guy, so this is an absolute stellar. It's just sublime. This is so exquisite, so mature, without being like old. It's not like ancient or old or whatever. And it's exceedingly elegant, very British, debonair, but somewhat constrained or restrained. It's not just super loud. It's not going to blast people, out of the restaurant, out of the cubicle, out of the workspace. It's going to politely announce your sexy, masculine confidence. Or if you're a woman, that's fine. This could be unisex, although I think it definitely skews masculine. Now, I like vetiver. Carlos from BFL, love you, Carlos. It's not the hugest vetiver fan. I know you're not, Carlos, because you made that abundantly clear in many, many videos. Having said that, Carlos does like some vetivers. They have to be done a certain way. I think this is more slightly in line with Carlos's taste as far as the vetiver. I'm not saying he loves this perfume. I don't think he was bowled over by it, if memory serves. But okay, well, let's just get into the notes, and then I'll just give you my final take on this thing. So, right away in the opening, you're going to get some lime and the bergamot certainly coming up with the vetiver almost immediately. You're going to get some ebony wood for sure. A little bitter orange will start to creep in. Sandalwood, I think, becomes apparent more into the deep dry down, and I would say the vetiver gets sweeter the longer you are wearing this fragrance. I think it becomes juicier and sweeter and softer, and just much more sensual, as the British say, sensual or sensual. And I think that as nice as the opening is on this, this is not its strong suit. I think this is one that gets better and better and better the longer it's on skin. And I think in particular by the second to third hour is when this really, really comes into its full own. Really close to the second hour. And then into the deep dry down, it's just sublime. It's sexy, it's refined, it's polite, but it definitely has an edge to it. I feel it's probably more of a nighttime scent. That's just my personal opinion. But you could certainly wear this in the daytime or even in the mornings if that's your cup of tea or you happen to work early. You want to smell fantastic. Wear this and feel absolutely secure that you will smell like a bazillionaire. Now, I really, really am learning to fall in love with this fragrance. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm really, really massively enjoying it. Much more so than when I first bought the fragrance. When I first bought it and sprayed it, I was absolutely unimpressed because, in no small part, I was mostly into cigar and tobacco-based, in many cases, very expensive fragrances. And secondly, I'd already fallen in love with Dunhill Icon, the original. So I felt like this was a 2 steps, if not 3 steps back, just very, very old-fashioned, more staid, not as loud, not as brash, not as seductive, not as overtly sexy. But the more I've learned to wait a few weeks, wait a month, wait 2 months, wear it again, rest a while, wear it again, I've learned to start recognizing what makes this fragrance unique and potentially very special, and an absolute no-brainer at the $45 to $60 price range for an absolute phenomenal bottle. It's going to last you probably a few years to come unless you just spray like crazy every day. This thing's going to last you the next 4 to 5 years, most likely. Probably much longer if you have a medium to a very large fragrance rotation, as do I and many, many others in the game. Many have far larger collections than even I do, and I've got a fairly ginormous one at this point. No, I mean, this is a no at the $40 to $60 price range, guys. This is an absolute wicked stunner. It's sexy, but again, it is somewhat semi-quiet. You know what I mean? It's going to be a fragrance that lives intimately with you at about 2 to 4 inches max in most cases, unless you just spray like a bazooka. If you just douse yourself, I'm sure, yes, you're going to project probably 2 to 3 feet out, at least for the first hour. And then sadly, it is still going to die back, because that is the DNA of this fragrance. It's not made to push out at, like, an arm's length. That's not the way this fragrance is. And having said that, if someone is downwind from you, they're very much going to get it, regardless of, the DNA is not going to matter so much at that point. I just think this is a very refined, stately, understated, very British, yet very refined, masculine, and yes, quite sexy fragrance. Feel free to disagree. Now, those other elements that we talked about earlier that I mentioned, for example, the bitter orange came out, I think, more into the mid of the opening. The sage is, I think, almost always present. And the black pepper, very, very small amount. I think that's more present in the opening. I don't get as much of the pepper in deep dry down. I do get the suede for the bulk of the ride, except maybe by the very, very far deep dry down, the suede all but disappears. You may have a better nose than me, and you may smell it still into the deep, deep dry down. I did not, but it definitely lasted the bulk of the ride. Now, as far as longevity on this fragrance, I would give it a very decent to good rating, not necessarily great. I'm going to say this is a healthy 6 to 8 hours type fragrance. It's really not going to push anything past that unless you absolutely go ballistic with the trigger. If you just spray yourself like into tomorrow, into Futureland, then yes, you probably could theoretically get past 10 to 12 hours, especially if you go heavy on clothing. But it's really not in the character of this fragrance to really naturally do that. I think this is going to sit very comfortably, sort of in that 7 hour to maybe 8 to 9 hours if you go heavy on the bottle. And that's about all you're going to realistically be able to expect. Again, in most scenarios, if you go 30 to 50 spritzes, yes, of course, you probably will get up to 24 hours on clothing, but that's really not the name of the game. No one's really going to do that in likelihood. But again, if you have a problem with 6 to 7 hours, I don't really know what you're doing. Take a travel decant or just take the bottle and hide it somewhere safe and cool. Do not store these guys in really hot spaces. It will break down the molecular aromatic aroma chemicals. So don't do that. You will damage your juice if you do that as well. Do not store these in strong, direct UV light, a la sunlight, unless the bottle is just super, super paint protected or has like some kind of thick colored coating that can prohibit the UV sunlight from entering. Just don't do it. I guess unless you live somewhere really cold, you could probably get away with that. But otherwise, highly, highly unrecommended. That's going to do it, guys. I guess most of you are at work. Sorry you couldn't join me. It's been a while since my last live cast. That's going to do it. I hope you enjoyed this live cast, and I hope you please give Dunhill Icon Elite a try. Guys, if it doesn't work for you, you could sell it and make most of your money back, or it'd make a phenomenal gift to someone, hopefully special in your life, a dad, a friend, a brother, a coworker, somebody, I'm sure. Or you could just donate it to FragCom charity and make someone else very, very happy indeed. That's going to do it, guys. Until next time, spray often, spray well, live life on your terms. Love you guys. Peace out. This was episode 240. Payao. See you next time.